Hey, everybody, and welcome to another episode of the Raad Life. I wanted to address a particular topic today, and I have a really special guest with me today to help me through it. We all know that what we're going through right now is a sort of unprecedented situation, regardless which way you look at it, right? Like I've said before on other shows, this is my first pandemic. How about you, right? But it's not a passing thing. This is not an incident that happened over a weekend. This is not something that took place over a week, and we were basically our normal flow of life was disrupted momentarily, and then 10 days later or whatever, we weathered the storm, and now we're on the other side of it. This has now become part of our story, right? And what I mean by that is, it's been 6 months almost, right? It's likely to be another 6 months, maybe even another year, right? At that point, this is not just something that was a bump in the road. This becomes a little bit more impacting, right? Part of our journey, part of our story. Think about the kid that basically, the high school graduate that graduated last year, but was not able to have a graduation. This is a milestone in the story, their journey, in the journey of their life, right? People that are going to go to school in the fall, and if you're in Los Angeles County or San Diego County, and more likely than not, Orange County will follow suit, there will be basically distance learning. And what does that bring? How does that challenge? This is part of our story now, right? And so we all have talked about the importance of storytelling. And in the last few years, storytelling has taken on a very different dimension as a marketing tool, as a differentiator, as a reputation builder, as a way to connect with people. I mean, you see politicians doing it where they, instead of basically talking about a topic in a sort of an esoteric manner, they associate it with a particular person. They may even point to the top of the hall where they're talking, or point to the in front of them and say so and so, for example, who lives da da da, and they associate a person with the story that they're telling. Storytelling is a very powerful medium, and anybody who has ever even looked at it for the slightest realizes that it could really make a big difference in how you are presented and how the world sees you, right? And it could be manipulated, I'm sure, for whatever purpose you want. But there's also an authenticity that can be projected through this. So with that being said, I would like to welcome my guest for the show on the Raad Life today, Mr. Michael Ashley, who is basically one of the best storytellers that I know. And he is out there doing this every day. I was talking, Michael, welcome to the show, first of all.
Thank you for having me.
I appreciate, I'm really happy to have you. I was just talking about how all of this stuff, like you and I talked a little bit before the show, all of this stuff, it's not just a bump in the road now. This is part of our story. The kid that basically graduated high school, that this is a milestone for them. The person who's going to basically be distance learning, if you're in LA County, Orange County, maybe it's probably following suit, San Diego, and whatever it is, this is not just what did you do over your weekend? This is now 6 months. This could potentially be another year, a year and a half, right? And so, I hate to put it this way, but it's like, how are you, if you're in that impressionable years in your high school, how are you even dating? How are you even, what's your social life look like, right? I mean, Call of Duty and PlayStation. I mean, how are people communicating? So this is all our journeys, right? This is all our stories. And I was saying that the medium of storytelling is very much, has always been a very strong way for us to communicate. I mean, from the times before even people wrote anything, right? The Bible itself was basically a compilation of stories, right? So the medium of storytelling has been always a powerful medium. And we have probably gone into more of a sophisticated way of looking at that as a tool, as a way to promote ourselves, a way to capture meaningful stuff that we have to share. It could be even manipulated. You could basically present a false story, a narrative. It's a very powerful thing. And what we're going through right now is part of our story. So I was saying one of the best people in the business of storytelling is you, and I'm glad to have you on. So I would appreciate if you take a minute, Michael, and I'm going to put up your website here too, because I want people to basically go to INK Wordsmiths.com and they can find out more about you while we're talking. But take a minute and tell people about this. How did, I mean, how did you get into this? Like, you wake up one morning and go, you know what, I've read everything and I'm basically going to start telling stories. What is it that made you get into this, and how long you've been doing it? Tell people a little bit about yourself.
That actually is the way I got into it. No, I'm just kidding. No,
He read
what
everything. There was nothing left to read that was of interest. So he decided to start writing it.
isn't that how everybody gets into it?
Yeah.
No, what happened was actually goes back to when I was 10 years old. I fell in love with the Lord of the Rings books, and I read them all, read the whole trilogy in about a month when I was 10 years old, and I decided that I wanted to be a writer. And so around that time, I had a fourth grade teacher, and she gave us our first assignment where she said that use your own creative abilities and come up with your own story. And so I wrote a story, and she got very upset. She called my mom into the office and she said, "Your son plagiarized J.R. Tolkien." And my mom said, "No, he didn't. It was written inspired by Tolkien, but he didn't plagiarize Tolkien." And then when my teacher found out that I wrote, and whatever I wrote was original, she said, "Well, in that case, you're really good." And she supported me to become a writer. And so that trajectory led me to be on the newspaper staff in high school. I was a playwright in college, a newspaper reporter. I went to film school, got a master's in screenwriting from Chapman University.
That's
and
cool.
went on, yeah, and went on to work at Disney. I was a screenwriter for Disney. I sold a hit movie to them called Girl vs. Monster. And while I was around that time, I was working at a day job. I had a job in corporate America. But after I sold that, things opened up in my life that I could go out on my own.
Mm-hmm.
And I can't say that I can take credit for this idea because it was my wife's actually. I had just written a book for a client. It was a book about evolution. And the idea behind the book was that people should actually move away from competition and move more towards cooperation. And we see that actually in nature with things like animals, like these vampire bats that engage in reciprocal altruism. And so I wrote this book for a client, and when I got done with it, my wife said, "You know what? Why don't you start your own content company? Why don't we do that?" She'd gone to film school with me, by the way. We were in different classes, but we were in the same screenwriting program. And I had clients I'd worked with in Orange County, San Diego, Los Angeles, and even up in the Bay. And she said, "Why don't we start our own content company?" And at first I was reluctant to do that, but then I realized that's a great idea. And I've always wanted to work for myself. And so that's how I got into it. And I saw a real need for storytelling, for telling the story of your company, of yourself. And there aren't many people that are doing this. There are not many people doing it well.
Right.
And if you think about it, everything comes down to storytelling. It's the way that we teach young people. We teach them parables to make sense of the world. If you meet somebody, we can't help but be engaged and persuaded and compelled by stories. So it seemed natural to get into this.
Well, it's very much part of our DNA, I think, as a way of form of communication. And I think it's interesting that when we start to standardize communication to where it's, like I've said this many times. I mean, one of the things, the benefits of doing this show, and again, I accidentally, kind of fell into it. So when I was asking that question, it was not it wasn't the tongue-in-cheek thing. I was like, I really do believe sometimes people, that kind of happy accidents, they fall into something that's a passion pursuit, and then they allow themselves to actually take that train and see where it goes. It's surprising and fulfilling in ways that they never anticipated. So, when one of the things that I got as a side benefit of doing this show, no intention of doing the show, turned 50, got an opportunity to do the show. The guy basically says, "Hey, would you like to do it?" Sure. I was like, Jim Carrey for 6 months. Sure. Why not? Yes, man. So I ended up realizing that I actually was offered a gift every Wednesday. We used to do it every week. Every Wednesday at midday, almost in my middle of my week, I was offered a gift. I could actually sit down and, as they used to say in the South, visit with somebody and actually communicate and talk, and not have it be based on an agenda, list of agenda items, or a to-do list or something of that nature. It was actually an exchange, a communication, a discussion, a conversation. And that verbal form of that, we do it even like we're doing right now, is storytelling. It's telling about stories in your background, projecting and using that as a base of communicating, common ground, whatever. And so I want to touch a little bit on what you said, when there's not a lot of people doing it. I mean, obviously we all do it instinctively to some level, but what you're talking about is in a professional capacity, in a kind of a sophisticated capacity, and that not a lot of people are doing it, and not a lot of people, they're doing it well, right? So when you realized that there was a need, what was it that you saw was there, and how was it lacking?
Sure. Well, I had a company before this many years ago when I was in the Chamber of Commerce back when I lived in Missouri. It was a small town in Columbia, and so I knew the power of networking. And I when I started my company, I actually went to the Mission Viejo Chamber of Commerce, and I gave my speech to the room. It was my first day. There were about 30 or 40 people there, and told them what I did. And I kid you not, 10 of them came up to me afterwards and they said, "Wow, you do that? This exists?" And it really struck a chord with people. And so it kind of snowballed from there. I didn't exactly know that this was the way I was going to go with my company. I was thinking at the time, I was doing magazine work and blogging and copywriting, but I wasn't thinking about writing people's books in the way that I do now. But that was the market responding to me. And over time, it's led to so many other things. And I feel like I've really, not to toot my own horn, but I've gotten really good at it. I've done over 25 books to date in the last 5 years.
Wow.
4 have been bestsellers, and there continues to be a need for this. Unfortunately, we are losing the skill of writing in our schools, and we're not emphasizing reading enough. And so there just aren't people who are able to do it. To your earlier comment, I have read a lot. I've read a lot of different kinds of books. My mother was a librarian. And so that is I don't really have any hobbies, but that's what I like to do. I like to read, and I like to introduce myself to all kinds of different concepts. I've always been interested in ideas and, and seeking truth, I guess. My major was philosophy in undergrad, and I get to learn. It's a really great thing. I'll give you an example. A few years ago, I met a gentleman named Neil Sahota, and he came into my office and he said he wanted to write a book about artificial intelligence. And for years, I had been fascinated by artificial intelligence. And here was an opportunity for me to get to learn about this subject while writing this book. And so that I think is amazing. And I think that a lot of companies have this problem, especially when it comes to tech companies. You have people that are very much mired in their field, and they have a myopic view. They spent years developing something, engineering it, but they don't know how to share that information, how to share that story, and how to connect with others. And I like to think of myself as a generalist, and it's my job to take the raw data, the raw information, and then reframe it in a way that compels people, especially using storytelling principles. And the foremost in that, I would say, is eliciting sympathy and empathy for the person that we're talking about. You want to go on a journey with people that you like, that you connect with, and that's a big part of what I do.
You know, a lot of this stuff that we're talking about, it hit me when you said about the bats, and what was it that you said? You referred to it as what, an esoteric.
Well, I was saying this reciprocal altruism.
Reciprocal altruism, and I giggled when you said that, because I'm thinking, yeah, you know, we should probably tell a whole bunch of people out there talking at one another right now that there's such a thing, because yes, there's a lot to be learned in that. And so I'm going to ask you a question, because you struck me as being, and I think you pretty much admitted it, as a voracious reader. Would that be a fair assessment?
I would say so, yes.
Guilty as charged. Okay.
Yeah.
All right. So as a voracious reader, I got to know, because I mean, if what I need to do once we're able to basically physically get together, I need to take you over to my parents' house. I grew up with books everywhere. Now, granted, my father's focus was everything from theology to war history to the documentaries to, you know, like biographies, things of that nature. Everything from old westerns to the late, you know, it's like, you know, thrillers, a lot of fiction, some non. So I grew up in that environment, right? So I have an absolute appreciation for the actual physicality of books, right? I probably have more books than I've ever leafed through, right? And if you lose me at Barnes and Noble, you know, come get me in 3 days, because I'll be fine, right? Now there's Starbucks too, so I'm definitely going to be fine. But as a voracious reader, and I'll out myself first, because the question is this: do you have a certain style of reading? Do you have a certain style of absorbing? I mean, for me, I tend to actually not read one book at a time. I tend to read multiple books at a time. I will set something aside. I'll come back to it. You know, I tend to leave things at a certain point, whether it's because now I'm basically absorbing and processing or whatever, but I tend to read multiple books at a time. Do you have a way that you basically, you know, read?
Yeah, I do. Well, first of all, I do like physical books, but should be something said with the beauty of a Kindle where you can get any book that you want on demand. I love that. The way that I do it these days is I have a Kindle and then I also have books, physical books. I'll read one chapter of one book. I'm usually reading 4 or 5 books at a time.
Okay.
And I will read one chapter of one book and then go to the other ones. And before the pandemic, that's what I was doing because I would try to read every single night. We have 2 young kids, but it was important to me to also just keep up in my field and learn about different ideas.
Right.
Nowadays, I'm just trying to keep up with the news cycle because there's so much going on and I have to do that too. But I am reading multiple books at the moment. I do it that way, but my favorite way to read, to be honest, is I love it when, especially if it's a novel and I'm really into it, is I can read a book in a day. And I can name books that I did that. Like there's a book called Childhood's End by Arthur C. Clarke. It's an amazing science fiction book. And I read it in one sitting. And it's not a short book. The Abyss by Michael Crichton. I did the same thing.
Great book.
I love when that happens. When I find a book that I just can't put down, even though Game of Thrones is the books are very long. I ended up reading that series in about 4 months, everything. Because I just couldn't stop reading them. So when I'm really into something, that's my favorite way to read. And the other thing I'll say is I generally never read introductions or forwards. I don't want to know. I don't want the setup. I don't want any spoilers.
I totally get it. Yeah.
And then I also, this annoys people that I borrow books from, but I never use bookmarks. And I always dog ear the pages, which I know probably isn't
guilty as charged.
People don't like that, but I do that. It's just
guilty as charged. And you know, it's interesting because I also don't like. I hate trailers. I hate trailers for movies. I don't want to know. I want that curiosity and that exploration to unfold. And in fact, it's funny because part of the joy and the evaluation of the quality of the content is how it is structured in terms of that. Like, you know, it's like, you know, you talk about character development, right? Whether it's in print or whether in, you know, that is part of the joy. And there's times when a thing is beautifully choreographed, beautifully laid out, but the character development is shoddy. And I'm like, oh man, you know, just kind of like it missed the boat there. It could have been so much more. So, and it sounds to me like you don't actually have a particular genre necessarily only, like your curiosity basically spans multiple genres, or do you find yourself reading? Because again, the other thing you do is that you read and you are in this professionally, you know, as far as actually developing the content. Do you tend to lean towards like, look, I'm not working right now, I'm going to basically want to read, but you lean towards something? Is there a particular genre that you lean towards?
Yeah, I would say that if I'm going to read, the thing I like probably the most is science fiction novels. I really like Philip K. Dick is a big influence on my life. I guess that's kind of combining my 2 passions. I really like things about philosophical, and science fiction provides that, but there's really good storytelling. I also like books about metaphysics. Those are my probably 2 major things I really like, but I read everything. I mean, I'll give you another example. A few years ago, I was hired to write a romance novel. So I read 50 Shades of Grey. I read the Bridges of Madison County. And by the way, I'll say this about 50 Shades of Grey. It's actually a good book. I know people will say it's not, but there's a reason why it's sold well. Right. And what I mean by this is that it draws people in. Yeah. People get on they get on Dan Brown. They say that it's not highbrow literature. To me, the mark of a good book is what I mentioned before, where you really want to read it. You want to keep turning those pages. And if it's doing that for somebody, if it's doing for the reader, then I think it's a good book. But also, I would say, to answer your question, I try to read things that I don't normally expose myself to. I'll give you an example. A few years ago, I don't watch the TV show Gossip Girl, but I happened to be somewhere where they
Right.
had like a free book of it. And I'm like, well, I should know what this is to be able to even, if someone brings it up the people don't talk about Gossip Girl that much, but
Right.
this is a few years ago. And I was thinking, well, if anyone ever
I,
brings
I, I, was, I was talking about Gossip Girl less than an hour ago, by the way.
I was like, I need to know
True
what this
story.
is. Oh, really? Okay. Well, I was like, I need to know what this is about. And so I read it. And so I like to look at subjects that I don't know anything about and things that I may not be interested in,
Yeah.
because it's important for me to be aware of these things that are going on. That's what I try to do.
I find myself, I think you and I are actually very wired in very similar ways. I find myself actually absorbing stuff. And when somebody says, why the heck are you basically absorbing this, my kind of go-to answer is, well, you never know when you're going to need it on Jeopardy. Right.
Exactly.
Right. And so, and I was not fibbing. I was not lying to you. I was talking about Gossip Girls
Okay, wow.
about an hour ago. And the reason why I was talking about it was not necessarily the show, because when, and I don't like seek it out, but when I actually watch it, I'll sit there and go, okay, so let me tell you what's going to happen. This is what's going to happen. So-and-so is going to connect with so-and-so. And then this is going to happen. And then it happens. And they're like, oh my God, why? It's like, because I read a lot. Like there's certain patterns to storytelling. But the reason I was talking about it was because the lead character there, what's his name? Bass. Can't remember the first name. Anyway, the millionaire's son or whatever, right? So he actually, the actor that plays him is a British actor. Mm-hmm. Okay. And that British actor, when I first saw Gossip Girl, I'm like, this is what is it that's throwing me here? Well, this British actor was talking with an American accent, a Manhattan American accent. And in the movie that I was introduced to him, or the series I was introduced to him, is actually a series, I don't know if you've seen it, called White Gold. White Gold is about a 1960s, after World War II, small town in England where it's a bunch of salesmen. So it's got a little bit of like almost like Boiler Room, a little bit of Glengarry Glen Ross, where it's a bunch of salesmen. They're selling white windows, like retrofit windows. Okay. So that's why the White Gold, it's a moneymaker basically. Right. And it's basically, they have no scruples in selling. They will basically do whatever it takes. There's womanizing going on. There's all this stuff going on. And the lead character is the same guy that plays this role in Gossip Girl, right? So similar to books, right? It's like if you're reading books by the same author, if it's part of a series or the style is, you can see connection to style. There's a certain joy in this. Like I was enjoying Gossip Girl now because this character in White Gold was somebody I really liked what he did in White Gold. So I totally get it. And again, we're talking about storytelling, and we're talking about conversational storytelling. We're talking about these days, Zoom storytelling, right? I mean, the medium varies, but I think the skill and the oratory component is still a skill set that we, if anything, maybe right now, I don't know, you tell me, maybe it's something that we should be even developing more. And a lot of people, maybe don't have that, and it's a muscle they should be, it would be smart for them to develop or hire you, one or the other.
Yeah, well, I very much think it's an important skill. If you think about it, everything comes down to storytelling. It begins with the way that we process information as children. We tell parables to children to help them make sense of the world. It's the oldest form of technology.
Right.
Speaking of books, I don't know if you've read *Sapiens* by Yuval Harari, but what he says is what separates our species from all other species on Earth is our ability to do one thing, which is to tell stories. The invention of lying, actually, is what he talks about. And what he says is you can never convince a monkey to give you a banana by promising him limitless bananas in monkey heaven. But with the right story, one perhaps involving short-term immediate sacrifice and the rewards in heaven, you can convince vast numbers of people to do anything. So I'd give a speech about this actually, and show a picture of the pyramids and talk about how would you convince vast numbers of people to do something like that, or to build a giant cathedral, or to do any of the things that we do. It largely comes down to storytelling. Our whole civilization, even America, is a story if you think about it. Right. It's a story that involves characters from our founding fathers. It involves stakes, which is of course freedom and liberty. This is a story that we tell. The fiat currency that we use is a story. The idea that corporations exist is a story. I'm not saying that it doesn't take away from its power, but everything is a story, and it would be foolish of us not to recognize this and use it. use it in our business. If you're trying to persuade somebody, if you're trying to engage them, tell the story about your business.
Inspire them.
Yes, exactly.
You know, drive, motivate them to take action. I mean, I think history itself is a story, but history is filled with people that basically use that, whether in dire circumstances, like Winston Churchill, and when Britain was being blitzed, Patton, whether it's you use Arthur C. Clarke, there's a lot of examples across myriads of styling. Even in what I do, to be honest with you, I mean, I'll share this. I don't usually share the story, but when I went to design school, it was a second degree for me. I had an undergrad in economics, a master's in marketing, and then I fell into, there was a down economy in 91, and I got this card that said, hey, Interior Designers Institute Summer Certificate Program. And I'm like, cool, arts and crafts for 12 weeks. Let's go. Right. And so I ended up basically in this, and I really fell into something I was felt very passionately about, and really was motivated and inspired by. So here I am as a form of expression, right? Because this is a form of creative expression. And so I'm like, cool, and I can make a career out of this. Okay, cool. And then at some point, honest, true story. So I continued. I'm like, okay, pass the arts and crafts part of the summer certificate program. Let's go do another degree. I got to a point where it was almost equivalent. I would compare it to a writer's block. Not that I've ever experienced a writer's block, but just what they say about it. Michael, I couldn't design myself out of a paper bag. I had a point where I couldn't design myself out of a paper bag. And the best thing I did for myself is I didn't push it, right? I just kind of I sat with it, I let it be. And I came to realize the form by which I designed was very rooted in what I was exposed to growing up, which was basically a lot of, TV, a lot of storytelling, right? And the way I design turns out is that when you walk into a place that I design, this is, again, I didn't this was looking back and going, oh, this is what happens, right? I found out that I designed, like when you walk into the space, you get the sense of the story, right? But it's almost like an opening chapter. So I don't insult you by holding it away. I basically tell you enough to draw you in, like you're saying, right? To basically have you navigate and kind of explore at your own pace, just like you're reading. People read very quickly, people very slowly. You read between the words, but go back on the lines. And then what happens is, as you delve deeper into the physical space, there are things that come across that actually reaffirm your initial assessment. And I was doing this instinctively, and I had no friggin' clue. I mean, it was almost like, oh my God, I've been basically trained to interior design by watching television, right? And instinctively, I picked up all this stuff. So so people tell stories through different mediums.
Yes,
it's still the same, right? What you're talking about. Weddings are stories. Yep. Right? They have a beginning, they have an end. So let's just delve with that for a minute. Are there certain rules of the road, if you will, for storytelling?
Well, yeah, I think that the number one thing that I would point to is the monomyth. And this is an idea also called the hero's journey. It was by the academic Joseph Campbell.
Joseph Campbell, yes.
Yeah, and what he talks about is that no matter where you grew up in, what period of time, what culture, we somehow have an archetype in our mind of what makes for a great story. And so it proceeds somewhat like this. There's actually 12 stages to the hero's journey, but I won't go through all of them. But usually begins like this. There's an ordinary world, the status quo, and then you have an inciting incident, something that happens that forces the character against their will, actually. They're thrust into the story, and generally they try to resist it. But they're brought into it, and they have to face certain obstacles, a villain. You give your character what they least want to happen in their lives, force them to face it, and then generally with the help of a mentor and some allies, they learn to deal with it. They learn to overcome the slay the dragon, and they come back. They call the last stage return with elixir. They bring it back to the tribe or the community, and they're healed. But I would go one step further with this, is that I think that we're actually living our own hero's journeys. I think our life is a hero's journey. And
I think that was Joseph Campbell's point, right? I mean, at least what he was trying to project is that it is at least a possibility with everybody, right?
Well, right. I mean, he was talking about this from an academic standpoint.
Sure.
He does talk about going into the abyss, and he talks about the need for us to do this. But to my knowledge, I wasn't hearing him say this very often. Maybe in the documentary series that he did with Bill Moyers, he gets into it. But I'm saying every one of us has a responsibility to rise to the occasion and view our lives as a hero's journey. And what I mean by that is we are often confronted, COVID-19 is a good example of this, of that which we least want to happen. We don't want these things to occur in our lives. It is external circumstances that are forcing internal changes. They're forcing us to summon the will and the drive to take care of what needs to happen in our lives. And sometimes we give up, we kill ourselves, or we abdicate our responsibilities. But if we don't, if we go on that hero's journey path and we really engage in these overcoming these obstacles, well, then we grow as people. In the same way that a hero grows, we have and the traditional arc of a story is you have a dynamic character. By the end of the story, they grow as people. And I think that's true with our lives.
Are you familiar? You're absolutely right. I mean, it's like, I think that is a common thread through a lot of stuff when it comes to storytelling. And again, it resonates on probably even a very foundational part of our just makeup as human beings, right? So I'm just throwing this out because I'm not sure if you've come across these or not. You might have. Are you familiar with a gentleman by the name of Joe Burke?
No, I don't think so.
Okay, Joseph Burke. He actually he's moved away from Southern California recently. He used to be the head of marketing for First Team here, right? And he wrote a book, and it's an interesting, he promised himself he was going to write this book. He's also, he developed like a soccer ball that you can play indoors. So like when, your parents tell you that you can't play ball in the house, yes, you can. You use one of his balls. And basically it won like best gift idea or toy thing, like the last couple of years, like every exhibit, every toy exposition. He wrote a book called The Anatomy of Yes, the story behind every sale. And what he does is stories sell products, but why? And more importantly, how can you construct a story that captures a customer's emotions, get them to ignore? And he builds it on the archetype model, right? And he wrote this because he promised himself he would write this book by a certain milestone, and the milestone was approaching. And so he basically literally had to find space for himself to write this book. And he literally rode the train up and down the California coast, right? Literally on the train until he finished writing this book. And I had him on for the soccer ball a couple of years ago, and his book finally came out last year. That book, actually, it's funny, you might be interested in that because I think it just like it hits that same wheelhouse where you're at. Sure. And it's a local guy. I'm gonna reach out to Joe, actually, see if I can get you a book actually autographed by him. That'd be kind of cool.
Thank you.
And then a gentleman by the name of Javon Para that basically wrote a book called The Captain. And he actually is, we're about to launch this show called Awaken or Awake with Javon Para on Golden Seal Productions, which is my production company. It is exactly what you're talking about. In fact, it has even another undertone of sort of that sort of first man story where the lead character's name is Adam. No, the woman is not called Eve, right? But and then there's the old man, the guide that basically shows up and is the form of the captain, and then there's a growth and awareness component. It is really, I mean, I think the reason why it resonates, why it has universal appeal is because it's such part of our story individually, right? So let's talk about, you touched on COVID and you touched about, that this is a challenging thing for us, right? Now, you are in the business of actually, whether it's books, whether it's, things that have a particular purpose, a mission, if you will, right? Versus just a sharing, or if it's just sharing. What do you tell people right now that you may be encountering that are really like almost at a standstill? Like these conditions are really severe. They're really challenging them, right? What advice do you give them, Michael? How can they, if it is possible, which I think you'll probably say yes, it is, how can they actually leverage what they're experiencing right now into part of that and owning it and empowering themselves by it?
Sure. Well, I think that the first thing that they can do is accept what's going on and to be okay with being vulnerable. A few years ago, Brene Brown.
Ooh, scary. Ooh, scary.
Yeah. A few years ago, Brene Brown had a very interesting TED Talk, and she talked about the power of vulnerability.
Yeah, great tech talk.
Yes, and for the first time in I don't know how long, maybe forever, we have the entire planet is dealing with one big challenge, which is COVID-19. Obviously, there are other things going on too, but we can all attest that we're dealing with this together. And of course, that's a phrase we hear all the time. We're all in this together. And I don't think that it is a show of weakness to admit to what you're dealing with, the
Mhm.
challenges that you're facing. Of course, you can go too far and overshare. Yes, that's true. But I think that if you acknowledge what you're going through and talk about it in a meaningful way, that it will connect you with other people because it's the same challenge. These are the same challenges they're facing. I'll give you another example. So this a few hours ago, I was giving a speech. I was a part of a panel for 90 people for provisors, and we're talking about just these same topics today. And in my backyard, we're building an office over there, and we had some work people over here. I'd asked my wife to ask them if they could just be a little quieter while I spoke, and she went out there to tell them that, and our 2-year-old got loose. And and I could see her through the window. She's freaking out. They couldn't find it. And I'm in the middle of this presentation. And so she just comes in here and I said, everybody, just give me 1 second. And I went out and I helped her find it. He was in the new office. I found him. And she was in my 5-year-old was crying. And so normally I would feel, oh my God, this is not professional at all. But I opened up about it and I kind of made a joke about it when I came back on the call. And I said, this is exactly what I'm dealing with right now. I'm working from home at the moment. And this is my reality. So I think that's the first thing we do. We open up, we're vulnerable, we share what's going on. But the other thing I think that we do is that we transcend our own situation by thinking about ways that we can be of service to other people.
Mhm.
Instead of trying to have transactional relationships with our prospects and with our clients, if we go deep and we think about ways in which we can develop real relationships. I mean, take you and me. We
Yeah.
met each other through a different networking group, and we've hung out a little bit. I remember seeing you at the Center Club,
Yeah.
and now here we are at this moment. We might not be doing this, but for COVID, here we are developing a greater relationship at this moment. And I think the more that we can do that, the more that we can get away from feeling isolated, feeling atomized, the more that we can rebuild community, whether it is virtual right now and then eventually it will be in person, the better off we'll be. And the more relationships that we have, the better personally, but also the better for our businesses too.
Well, we're look, human beings are social animals. I mean, we talk about people being antisocial, having these sort of introverted personalities or extrovert personality. The most introverted person on the planet is still a social animal, and you need a certain percentage in your diet, if you will, of that in order to basically function. I whether that's the mailman, for 2 seconds and once a week, or God knows what, or the person that's basically your neighbor that will chatter in your ear, to the point of nausea. We are social animals. It's just the way we are, and it's very true. It's very true that the vulnerability, I would even add the fact that by being vulnerable, like what you shared, right? I mean, like let's just look at a few things that happened during COVID, right? Wearing a mask, and I guess the only one that I have from my mask company, TaylorMade Face Mask, is actually a hot pink one. So don't judge me, but if you got thank you. It actually works with the blue. It's summer, it's spring. Okay.
There you go.
I can offer you a floral one. You want a floral one? No, just kidding. So the thing about it is, when this thing all started, and I admit myself, whenever I saw a picture of somebody in Hong Kong wearing a surgical face mask walking around to the subway, it was almost so cultural that I remember like comic books, and I remember illustrations and anime that basically had, like, if you saw somebody with a hat and a raincoat and a face mask, that person was Asian. It was Japanese. He was either in Tokyo, maybe he was in Hong Kong. There may be even a little sinisterness to it, but then you'd find out no, he was really a good guy, but this is the way they dress. I mean, it's like 1 degree from Ninja Turtles. You remember the hats and the coat, right? Exactly. So masks were like, oh my God, like it's something that was odd and weird, right? Within 6 months, it is no longer, there's no stigma anymore. Right. In fact, in some cases, it's the opposite of the stigma, right? So this vulnerability, this ability to say, oh, just hold on a second, guys, I'm working out at home. You know, I got to take care of the kid. Give me a minute. You know, I got to put a new bottle in, whatever it is, right?
Right.
Not only is it vulnerable, but it also makes me feel that I'm closer to you. You are allowing me in, right? And with that comes authenticity. And I think we are so hungry for authentic content, for authentic connection with people. You know, the 8x10 glossy, please, I could do without it. Like, just, you know, it's almost a waste of time. And I think this thing with COVID could be that history looks at this, and for some people, we may look at it and go, you know what, this was kind of an unexpected gift in certain ways.
Yeah, I think that that's the way we should look at most things in life.
Challenges, to your point, challenges, things that happened that we did not expect or didn't really look forward to, but they're learning experiences, learning opportunities, right?
Right. I remember I had a client one time, and he said something like, you can look at whatever happens to you as the best thing that happened to you or the worst thing that happened to you.
Right.
And to your point, again, this is storytelling. The way that the US, as well as the rest of the world, began responding to COVID was through narrative, through storytelling.
Right.
There were messages that went around the world, and it wasn't people physically doing something. I mean, that occurred, but we're all shaped by the narratives that we hear from the media. It's the greatest messenger, the greatest way to deliver information to people is through storytelling.
Right.
And I definitely agree with you. I think that so oftentimes I'm approached to write a book, and what I tell people that want to work with me is, be sure that you know who your audience is, of course, and be sure you know what you want to share with them. But whatever it is that we're going to do, let's find an interesting, unique way to do it. Let's not say conventional wisdom. Let's find something that's authentic, that's you, because even though I'm in the business of content, I'll tell you, there's a lot of content out there.
I wish wisdom was conventional, Michael.
What? What'd you say?
I said, I wish wisdom was conventional.
Oh, yes, right. Sure.
It's not conventional these days.
Well, what I mean is, if you hear endless platitudes and the same stuff again and again, people just shut it down. I mean, no one wants to hear that stuff. Right. They want to hear something that's authentic, that's real, that they're not hearing somewhere else. And without that kind of voice, they're going to tune you out. People, especially younger people, they've heard it. They've heard the slick marketing messages their whole lives. And when you do that, you run the risk of alienating people.
Well, and they can smell it. This is the thing that's interesting about our society in 2020, is that people are they got good bullshit into radars. They can smell it a mile away, and canned, regurgitated, non-candid, I would even say non-courageous content, right? With authenticity and vulnerability thrown in, which I'm not going to take away from the fact that's one of the scariest places to be in when you basically are living life, but what a rewarding place to be too, right? I mean, once you break through that fear factor of living life like that on those terms, it is a very rewarding existence. But a lot of people are, they something like this maybe pushes them into that, right? It forces them to basically address things differently in their life. You mentioned something a minute ago, and I'm reminded what I've been saying relevant to this situation with COVID, is that we were brought into this situation. We didn't really seek it out. It's my first pandemic. How about you? I don't really have a rule book by which to navigate this, right?
I've had better pandemics, to be honest. This one's just okay.
Oh yeah, this doesn't rise to the level of intellectual stimulation for you?
No, I was kidding. By the way, though, I'll tell you, my wife was complaining about something last night and saying she felt bad about something. I said, well, at least we're not living through a pandemic. And then she just burst out laughing. Well,
it's a hoax, dude. Nothing's going on. And,
right. Yeah.
Yeah. But it's fascinating because I have been saying it's either a challenge or it's an opportunity. Mm-hmm. And usually that's a process. Usually it's a challenge first, and then you have a moment. And that moment is when you decide, are you going to have a bunker mentality or a growth mindset? Are you going to look for something in this that you're going to learn? Are you going to embrace the opportunity to be challenged and see where and what you are really made of. Because, you know, we can all say, I'll sit here all day long and say, well, you know, under these circumstances that I'm basically, you know, trying to outline, I will probably do this. That is one thing to say. But the reality is, when you are faced by those conditions, will you really do that or not? And there's only one way to know, is when you are faced with those conditions, how are you going to react, right? So, I mean, how has business been during this whole, you know, pandemic?
Well, business has been going well, actually. And I find that people really do, they want to use this time for good, to your point. They want to seize this opportunity. So I have several clients that ordinarily wouldn't have the time. I work with a lot of CEOs,
Right.
and they do have the time to work on these books, and they want to share this content. They want to become thought leaders. And the publishing industry is has been hurting for years, and this didn't help it very much either. But I'm happy to say that I worked on a book that will be coming out. We just sold the book to Skyhorse Publishing. It's coming out in May. So business is going well, in spite of everything. And I definitely agree with your point about seizing the opportunities. There's a quote from Thomas Paine about these are times that try men's souls, and of course that's true for women too. It's easy to be a good person. It's easy to be just and ethical when everything is going your way. Just like it's easy to be a good parent when you have really easy, relaxed kids.
Right.
I think that situations like this force us to be our better selves. And I won't say that it's been a cakewalk for me. I've definitely had my moments during this where I have felt overwhelmed. My family has felt overwhelmed. But I think if you nurture and cultivate a mindset and a mentality, which is, I'm going to try to look for the silver lining in what's going on. I'm going to be in a place of gratitude for what is occurring. Making that mental shift, it really opens up things in your lives.
You know, Michael, the other thing too is, I think, you know, it's a bit of a luck of a draw, or you know, your lot, because I think people like I encountered my first really kind of like, you know, cataclysmic kind of change, if you will, in terms of, you know, profession or career, or kind of that moment of truth, was in 91, right? I mean, other than things that were challenging, just basically on living in a particular country, and then kind of the safety factor and whether you need to move or not. But actually, like, where you're on a path and then something happens and the kind of the floor kind of, you know, somebody changes the game rules, right? 91. And then we had another one basically, you know, at 2000, and then another one at 2008. And it's interesting because when I talk to people that have been through paradigm shifts, they don't look at what's happening today as being a walk in the park. They don't look at it as being something that shouldn't be taken seriously. But they also know from their journey, from their hero's journey, right, that they basically, there is a day after, right? And there's that the going through it is a combination of innovation, resiliency, you know, kind of street smarts a little bit, strategy, growth, personal growth, embracing those opportunities for growth, because they've been through it before. They're, versus somebody, for example, who has not been through this before, they're kind of at a disadvantage, because the first time you encounter it, you don't really have a reference point to it. So again, what you're talking about is where you may not personally go through something, but by storytelling, we are basically empowering these people that have not personally experienced something to have a reference point. You know, and it's kind of a fascinating tool, if you will. Like, you know, not only is this a time to basically tell your story maybe in a more empathetic way and connect with people. And you and I were talking before the show, like, of some people, you know, like people who laid off people at the beginning of this pandemic, companies who laid off people at the beginning of this pandemic, to what seemed to be almost like a ruthless, you know, like unethical way of going about it. There will be a price to pay for that. That's part of their story now. Right? People who basically are now faced with the reality that their yesterday's normalcy will never be again. And what are they going to do now? Right? And so we are all in this together. It's true. But I also think that we don't necessarily walk in each other's shoes exactly. Right? So the common thing, and this is one of the things that I've been saying from day one, is You know, I grew up in one country. I was born in one country. I was born in Iraq. I grew up in Kuwait and Abu Dhabi. I went to school in Switzerland. You know, for the majority of my life, until one day I woke up and realized, wait a minute, no, this is not the truth. I didn't really feel I belonged anywhere. Like I was just kind of like, you know, a nomad, right? And I looked at that as a negative. And then one day I woke up and I go, wait a minute, it's not true that I don't belong anywhere. I actually belong everywhere. And there was an empowerment moment that came out of that, right? So one of the things I've been saying relevant to the COVID is that a year from now, 2 years from now, you could be sitting in a cafe in France. You could be sitting on a, you know, you're about to get on one like a rickshaw somewhere in Asia. You could be sitting, you know, hiking the Nepal. You could be driving the Amalfi Coast. Where you could be anywhere on the world, and you can encounter another human being, and you could actually say, "So, how was it for you during COVID?"
Right.
And we actually have a universal point of reference to initiate contact with another human being on this planet. Like that is an amazing things for us to have.
Yeah, I completely agree with that. And to your earlier question at the very beginning of the show, I think that children that they're growing up in this time are developing resiliency, and they are yes, they're faced with these problems, and it's not the way we would like their childhoods to go.
Right.
And with my own family, I'm doing everything I can to normalize this when possible. But to your point, yeah, we all share this same commonality. Unfortunately, I think that there is a prevailing narrative in the media that seeks to isolate people, to show us all the ways that we are different. But the fact is, the real truth is we have much more in common and always have, even
True.
before COVID-19 hit. I thought about it this way, you know, even looking back at World War I and World War II, if you were to put those people on either side of that conflict, if you were to put them in a room,
Mm-hmm.
especially if you had beer in that room, some
Mm-hmm.
alcohol too, and give them a couple hours and just had them talk. And I say alcohol because their inhibitions would be lowered. You could be having them do something else. They could be playing a sport or something.
No, beer is good. I'm good with beer.
You good with beer? Okay. I think what would happen is they would actually say, "What am I doing here? Why am I
Yeah.
fighting this?" And I know there are obviously other reasons why we were in World War II, but what I meant by this is that too often I think we, especially in this country, when there are things like the 2003 war, when we went back and we fought the war in Iraq, we can tend to dehumanize a whole country, a whole other group of people. But we have much more in common than we have apart. And when we find those commonalities, and maybe it's through tragedies like COVID-19, we realize that we're all people. We all generally want the same things. We all breathe the same air. We all need food. We need sleep.
Yep.
You mentioned we're social animals. We have so much more in common than we have that are apart.
We still all put our pants one leg at a time, right? I mean, we still have Maslow's hierarchy of needs, right? That pyramid doesn't go upside down just because you're on one side or the other. Yeah, you know, it's interesting. I agree with you. I think that is an example of storytelling that is almost like for evil purposes, right? For unfortunate purposes, is where that divisiveness, okay, where we start to weave narratives and stories that are basically, driven by establishing the differences versus the commonalities. And from my perspective, we all pay a price for that. There's an unavoidable cost that comes with that, and it will always come with that. Sadly, completely self-imposed, could easily be avoided if we chose to approach it differently. And while we go through this, what we do and how we navigate this crisis, and any other crisis, to be honest, it will not be the last crisis we face individually or as a communal nature. But how we face this, how we engage, how we interact with one another, even if nobody else knows down the road, we individually know how we behaved. We know how we basically act, and that will now be part of our story.
That's right.
That we may never share with somebody because we may not really feel very proud of how we behaved. But whatever the motivation of the moment seems to be, there's very little that I could ever justify reason to basically develop a divisiveness and encourage it rather than a unification of purposes, a sense of togetherness. None of us do it on our own. I mean, whether it's in business, whether it's in life, I mean, we are all writing our own stories, whether we are putting it on paper or not, right? And how we behave during the COVID is very much part of our story.
Yeah, I couldn't agree more. And I think that you're right. I mean, companies that acted in ways that were less than honorable, people will remember that. And they will, I mean, I think that, again, it's important. How we behave is very important. It's also important to lead by example.
Yep.
I think that there are many instances, I don't have to get into a political thing here, but there are many instances of political leaders who have said one thing and done something different during this time. And I think people are aware of that. And I think that we need to remember and try to always be our best selves. Let me put it that way. I think that's what this life is about.
Well, it's unfortunately that all that negative energy, all that wasted, talking at one another versus to one another, right? And kind of like helping our each other through this. The old adage of being your brother and sister's keeper, I really believe that. The golden rule still applies. And when you look at, unfortunately, a culture that has been conditioned, okay, by the weaponizing and kind of politicizing of things like fear, okay, it is not any surprise to me why we have basically reacted the way we did at the COVID, especially at the beginning. Like, when you condition people to fear, and that is the story you keep telling them, and then something like this comes that you really have no control over, and then they basically are now afraid and fearful for their loved ones and basically doing things that are a little extraordinary and extreme, you can't really blame them. They have been conditioned to basically react to circumstances like this because of the unfortunate weaponizing and politicizing of issues, rather than, and that's the ethical narrative, right? That's when you look at yourself in the mirror in the morning, and it's just between you and your reflection, and do you like what you see or don't you like what you see? The old, the myth, the hero's journey, the myth. You're looking at yourself. There's nobody else, embellishing what you're seeing. It's right there, and right, staring right back at you, and that is part of your story. So what do you want your story to be like? Whether it's your business, whether it's your family story, it's your legacy, you have complete control over that. And yes, those circumstances like COVID may come your way. You still get to decide.
Yeah, well, I think, and to touch on fear for just a moment, returning to that children's story that I said I worked on, the book was about getting away from fear and moving more towards love. Now, love can mean many kinds of things. It could be the agape love, the love of
fellowship.
Yeah, fellowship.
Yeah.
Unfortunately, the prevailing narrative from the media is fear. It's the way that we've been sold every war. It's the way that we've been sold to fear everything regarding terrorism, and now COVID-19 comes about. And so I think that as committed people in this community, in this world, that we should find ways to share stories that don't elicit fear, that move more towards love. Because what is fear? Fear is about lack. It's about scarcity. And we need to be more in an abundant mindset. That doesn't mean abundant, like get me more cars, more houses. I mean more abundance when it comes to love and to relationships and to what really matters in life. If we move towards that place, then we get away from the fear, because the fear is constricting. It doesn't, again, to my earlier point, it doesn't allow us to be our higher self. When we're in a place of fear, we can't think clearly, and we can't think about the future in the way that we want to. It really thwarts our ability to have the lives and experiences that we want. And the more that we can get away from that fear mentality, the better.
But what you're talking about is curiosity also, and love, right? I mean, fear is based in the unknown, like you said. It's the not knowing, right? And it's also I think another layer to it is the worry about the fact that if you expose yourself or allow yourself to be exposed to another alternative point of view, that you will somehow, your current stand will basically be undermined and compromised, right? And not wanting to allow that, not wanting to be challenged, which is really sad. I mean, that's a really sad way of living as far as I'm concerned. Like, the whole point of basically having circumstances that are alternative to the way that you think and allowing yourself to be exposed to them, is it actually tests the strength of your beliefs. It's the strength of your resolve, the strength of your principles, right? I mean, to fear it and to basically do everything in your power to ignore it, first of all, it doesn't go anywhere. It's still there, right? You could be afraid of whatever it is, and it's still going to be there. Facing it, and actually maybe facing it with a sort of, I hate to put it this way, but like a skip in your step, right? And like a sort of sense of curiosity, and like, oh, let's see where this goes, kind of thing, right? I'm safe. Physically, I'm okay. I've got food in the pantry. My water and electricity is still running. I could maybe dip my toe in this thing. Let's see where it goes. I think once you develop that sort of reaction, once we develop that sort of habit, yes, life is a lot richer. It's a lot richer. It doesn't mean that everything you encounter will basically morph you in a way that you don't want, because at the end of the day, you still decide, right? I mean, we're writing our own story right now. We're doing it. You and I are doing it right here, right? The people who probably are listening to this when we first started are going, well, how are we going to talk about storytelling? And I've heard about storytelling, and it's going to be a business tool and all this stuff. And you and I have gone down this path. And to your point, we've known each other, but we haven't really had this conversation before, right? Where it's like on many levels, deeper. This is your story. You get to decide how to write it if you have the courage and the vulnerability and the willingness and openness to receive, right? Then you get to script the story of your life. And this is just a chapter. This is just a chapter. This is neither the beginning or the end of the book. I mean, this is just the chapter that you're writing now.
That's exactly right. That's exactly right.
Michael, I really appreciate you being on, man. It was really a joy to have you. And yeah, you bring the beer next time, but yeah, definitely. I foresee a lot of more conversations with you and I now.
Thank you.
And good luck with the office.
I appreciate that. Thank you.
Yeah, I'd love to see what you come up with, but keep telling the stories, keep helping others tell theirs as well. And I appreciate you for being part of mine today.
Thank you so much.
Thanks, Michael. You take care. Bye-bye.